Hey guys, it's Chloe, and it's time for another tier list. If your favorite convention isn't listed, it's because I haven't been to it. But if there's a convention near you that you think I should check out, feel free to leave recommendations in the comments below. But first, you're probably wondering where I got this awesome My Valentine shirt. My friend Sparkle Girl Costume sells them on her Etsy shop. She sells t-shirts, stickers, decals, even mermaid tails. I especially appreciate the fact she offers merch of tons of Yu-Gi-Oh characters, not just the usual stuff with Yugi and Kaiba. So check out Sparkle Girl Costume on Etsy to snag something with your favorite duelist on it. With that housekeeping out of the way, let's start ranking some cons. So we're gonna start with the hometown favorite, Anime Next, or at least it was the hometown favorite back when I actually lived in New Jersey. You know, it was my very first con, so I'll let it keep the title. It's a lot different now than it was when I first started going. I'd say the venue change helped a lot. It was probably like a B tier back when it was held at the Garden State Expo Center, which doesn't exist anymore. But once it moved to the Atlantic City Convention Center, it went right up to an A. I mean, cosplay chess and the dating game aren't as good now as they were back when it was held at the Garden State Expo Center, which is why it's not an S tier. But aside from that, it's still one of my favorite conventions because there's tons of other great programming, and you're just a short walk from tons of really nice restaurants and shops. And if you're willing to travel even further outside the convention area, you can also go to the beach to do some photo shoots, which is really nice. So I think Anime Next is a comfortable A tier. So I'm gonna skip a couple here because the next convention I went to after that was Castle Point Anime Convention, which is Stevens Institute of Technology's con, but it's since grown large enough to be held at a proper convention center. So congrats to them on that. They really deserved it because I had a good time when I went to this con. College-run cons are kind of a crapshoot depending on the size of the school and the size of the convention and how much funding that it actually has. I'm sure it's a lot different now at the Meadowlands than or wherever it's held versus when it was on campus. But from my memory, I remember it being, once you got over the confusion of figuring out where registration and badge pickup was, it was nice walking through campus, seeing all the other cosplayers, bopping around to different panels. And they had good panels, not just random in-character Q&As or stuff that you would see average attendees putting on, but panels that you would expect to see at larger conventions like Anime Next. It was probably more of a B+ when I went, but the fact that they have grown to the point where they can get themselves a better venue, I'd say makes it worthy of an A title. Even maybe an A-, but still very much an A. The next one after that I went to was Clovercon. It's a tiny little 4-H run convention in the middle of Bridgewater. I mean, it was cute, I guess. By the time I got to my last year of school, ticket prices had gone quite a bit up, even though nothing too significant had changed about the event. It's what you would expect from a typical 4-H run convention. You know, you got a couple of basic panels. I think Anime Parliament was probably the gem that really stuck out to me. That and Anime Trivia, which my partner at the time cheated at to win a giant squid hat and a creepy China doll. That was a fun time. I don't remember anything about this one that made me want to immediately pre-register for next year or even think about coming back. Do I want to do C tier or D tier? It was probably more of a D tier when I went, but I did get some pretty funny stories out of it, so I think that bumps it up to a C at least. Next one is Oticon. I know Oticon's went through some stuff since I went in 2014. I'm so old, I went when it was held in Baltimore. I don't remember if they were capping ticket sales or if they started doing this after I went. Probably had one of the biggest vendor halls I'd ever seen, and they had a lot of cool stuff that I had never seen in any other convention. And I even got to meet Little Karibo there, which is pretty awesome, but getting shut out of his panel due to the line filling up before it was actually supposed to open was not awesome and kind of a disappointment. There were some other good panels. I think after that I ended up wandering into an Aniplex panel and walked out with a Madoka Magica poster because they were promoting Rebellion at the time. But I do remember it being a little too crowded. Probably because they didn't start capping ticket sales yet. If the quality of the con didn't start dipping then, judging from what other attendees said, this was probably right around the time when it would start dipping. Overall though, I'd probably put Oticon at a B tier. It's probably not one you need to go to every single year, but I think it's worth going at least once or twice. But definitely check out some other up and coming cons in that area if you live in the DC area or the tri-state area. Alrighty, next up we have Liberty City Anime Con. Like, I know there's New York Comic Con and now there's Anime NYC, but this was the first New York convention that I'd actually been to, and I was so excited to see that move to Times Square because it meant that I could actually go, because I think the first year was held in White Plains, which is way too far. It wasn't in the best part of New York City, and by best I don't necessarily mean safe, I mean in terms of nearby things to do. I do remember Liberty City having really good staff members. I don't know if they're still there, but I remember I had misplaced my video camera when I was stopped for photos on the first day, and I was freaking the hell out. I was searching the place up and down trying to find it. I went to Con Ops and they started looking for it. Within a couple hours, I had my camera back, so points to them for staying on the ball with that situation. Staffing alone definitely puts them in a higher tier. The question is it a B or an A? I think this con changed venues at least one time, but when I went, it was at the Crown Plaza, Times Square. It was very classy, very elegant, although it was very weird. The elevator system was really weird. Like, if you wanted to go up, you had to take a certain elevator, and if you wanted to go down, you had to take a certain elevator. It was hard to get around at that con just because of that situation, so that was a little confusing. They probably had maybe 2 or 3 really good panels. I do have some pretty good memories of this con. It was the first con that I had been to since launching all of my cosplay social media. It was the first time I ever did a professional photo shoot where I actually had nice pictures taken. First time I'd ever been photobombed by a voice actor from the series I was cosplayed from, which was a pretty fun time. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go that particular year because I live down here now, but they actually managed to get Sea-Dog VA as a guest, so I give them points for that. So I'd say Liberty City's main strengths were guests and staff. And I'd say panels and, to an extent, location are probably weak spots. But good guests are subjective because it really depends on who you actually want to see and who you're trying to get autographs from. So I would say based on that, it's a B+. Alrighty, next up is gamicon. Gamicon felt like I was going on a family vacation almost because it was held at the Tropicana, which is a place that my mom and I have vacationed at many times when I was younger growing up in New Jersey. That said though, they didn't utilize as much as the hotel as they should have. I feel like they had a lot more space allocated to them than they were actually using, so the place did look kind of empty. Vendors hall was pretty small. Honestly, there weren't really any, they didn't really have panels. I think there's the basic ones like Cosplay 101 or Cosplay Competitions 101. Nothing too specific, but it was a video game convention, not so much an anime convention, so it might be to be expected. I feel like for a video game convention, the gaming ring was kind of a letdown. Like, they had a bunch of Smash setups because they were having a tournament that weekend, but that was really about it. The only reason I would have thought about going back for another year was just because of the venue. It happened to be somewhere that I enjoy going to anyway. But now that I live several states away, I don't see myself ever making plans to go to this con ever again. You know what, I'm gonna say D tier. I had to leave early on Sunday to go back to school and I wasn't even mad. Alright, the next one I went to was derpycon. I unfortunately only got to go for one day because that was all my budget and schedule would allow. This was the first mixed genre convention that I'd ever been to. It had the pony motif, obviously, because it's named after Derpy Hooves from the My Little Pony fandom. There was a good bit of everything. It wasn't like the convention was dominated by ponies or anime. It was probably about equal across the board. It kind of had a cozy vibe to it, which I appreciated. It was at a nice hotel. I'd say the best panels that they had were the voice actor Q&As. I forget which voice actor it was. I don't know if it was Todd Habercorn or somebody else, but somebody was significantly late, and so the people in that line were not very happy. And they had a couple good game show panels as well. I think they had a really good Pokemon themed game show. That was a lot of fun. But outside of those, panels were just okay. The vendor hall was a decent size, but didn't have a ton of variety. I wish I'd gotten to spend more time at this con or been able to go back for a second year. From what I do remember, I did have a good time at this con, so I'll give it a B tier. Next up is Southwest Florida Con. This was the con that I left after 10 minutes because I was so damn bored. When I went to Southwest Florida Con, it was held at the Holiday Inn in Fort Myers, but it has since been moved to the Crown Plaza, I believe. And they definitely did not have enough of the venue, or unless they just chose not to use more parts of it. I remember we were crammed in like sardines, vendors were right on top of each other. It was a fire hazard just waiting to happen. And they didn't even have panels at all. It was honestly just a trade show with extra steps, so solid D tier for me. Now onto their other event, Clovercon, because they're run by the same organization. They're not there anymore because I think they also moved to the Crown Plaza, but I really like the Calusa Nature Center and Planetarium. That was such a cool venue for a con. I'd never thought about going to a convention in the woods, so to speak, but it was fun, at least from a photo shoot perspective. You could take some really cool pictures out there. I hate that the Nature Center can't use this name anymore if they want to if they ever want to do another convention of their own, because they got swindled out of those rights by these organizers, and that really sucks. So that definitely keeps it out of the high tier for me. I remember I had a great time taking pictures. It was cool walking around and seeing all the different animals and stuff like that. And they ended up putting some of the panels in little cabins in and around the Nature Center, which I thought was really cool. I mean, the panels themselves left a lot to be desired, but I could still appreciate the novelty of it. So I would give it a C+. Alrighty, SpaceCon! I expected a little bit more from this con, considering it was at the Lee Civic Center, which is, I mean, it's not Orange County Convention Center, but it's still a decent size for any convention of any size. But maybe just because it was an up-and-coming con that they didn't have a whole lot that they could offer, just either due to funding or just couldn't get enough vendors together. There honestly weren't really any good panels. I'd say the highlights for me were the game room, and by that I mean really the Smash room, because it was really, they only had that just for the purpose of running a Smash tournament. And even then, I don't think it was the con that organized the tournament. I think it was the girl who was running all the Southwest Florida tournaments in the area, so can't really give the con credit for that, although it was very fun. But I mean, this was a sci-fi con. There wasn't really a lot of anime stuff, aside from certain vendors having a couple pieces here and there. And they downgraded their venue the following year, which was really disappointing to see that they weren't at the convention center anymore, but rather they were at a shrine downtown. So that made me lose a little bit of hope for this con, but it wasn't the worst one I've been to. If you work a normal schedule and you happen to be free that weekend and you're in the area, then I would say go check it out. But for me, I would say it's a C tier. All right, megacon. I know that this con got memed a lot this year with all the guest cancellations, and people were getting really frustrated over that, which is really sad, but I kind of understand because, you know, COVID. But I went in 2019 when things were actually normal, and actually they still had a lot of guest cancellations back then too. I guess that's just a thing that happens with megacon. Luckily for me, I'm not somebody who goes specifically for the guests. It's kind of just, if they happen to be there and I happen to be in the autograph area when they are, then I might spontaneously drop the $30 to get the autograph and picture, which is what happened when I went to the Ruby section. I met Barbara Dunkelman, who voices Yang. That was a fun time. Even with the cancellations, they still had a good batch of celebrities like Stephen Amell and the cast of Ruby. So I can't fault them too much for whatever guest issues they may have had. But I personally haven't been disappointed by a guest yet. I would have liked to see some fan-run panels there. You know, just to give us a little something extra to do, because I did find myself waiting around a lot in between bigger panels. That's something to think about. Although the dealer's room was very nice, although very crowded. Maybe it's because I was wearing my Believe It wings for one day. That probably didn't help. Nah, it was pretty cramped, but just because it's a big con. But I did have a really good experience at megacon, and I do plan on going back in 2022 with my crew, so I will give it an A. Minus. Yeah, A minus. Next up, we have Fandom Fest. This is the Lee County Library run convention held in downtown Fort Myers. And I kind of like their setup. I like how it's you have the main pavilion in the middle of the library where you have music, vendors, tons of other different stuff that you can walk around and look at. They'll even hire character companies to do meet and greets and photos with kids, which is really nice. I personally enjoyed running the cosplay DIY room, and I'm looking forward to doing that again later this year. You're gonna have your basic panels like Cosplay 101 or whatever, but I mean, that's to be expected. This is more of a family event where you just take your kids out for a day of fun. It's not really for serious cosplayers looking to learn more about their craft, or anime fans to do a deep dive discussion of Attack on Titan. It's mostly going to be surface level stuff, but that doesn't mean it's terrible. It's just if you're a seasoned con goer who has more experience, then you're obviously going to get more out of the much larger conventions like Dragon Con or MegaCon. But for what this is, it's a nice event. I like going to it. I even had a good time doing stuff for the virtual event last year, so I'll give it a comfortable B+. Alright, Holiday Matsuri! I love this con so much. I love how people just take the Christmas theme and absolutely run with it. Like, normally people watching is an afterthought at cons if you're hustling and bustling trying to get to your panel, your photo shoot, whatever. I'd say Hallmat is the best con for people watching because it's so cool to see how people took your favorite characters and got them all dressed up for Christmas. I think that's so fun to look at. And I'd say Hallmat's venue is a strength and a weakness at the same time. It's a weakness because of how difficult the parking situation is. Like, if you don't get there by 7 a.m. on Friday, then you're gonna be stuck parking in the grass somewhere or having to park further down the street, which is a huge pain in the butt. But it's also a strength because it's a really nice hotel. There's a pool with a little waterfall and a water slide. There's tons of nice walkways, so plenty of spots to take pictures, which my group definitely took advantage of, but I still want to go back and do more. It's definitely a place where you want to take your time to really explore this venue for all that it has to offer. And I remember they had some pretty fun events besides just regular panels, like the Sailor Moon PJ party. That was a lot of fun. So honestly, I'd say Hallmat gets an S tier from me. I want to go again. But for me, Hallmat's a 10 out of 10 convention. You need to go at least once in your life. If you live in Florida, there's no excuse for this con not to be on your list. Alright, these last three are gonna be really weird to judge because I went to them during the COVID era. I'm sure they were a lot better before the pandemic, but I can't really say for sure because I didn't get to go until this year. But we're gonna do it anyway. Alright, MetroCon. I'd say MetroCon's main weaknesses are its programming and its staff, but their cosplay events are easily their strength. Namely, Cosplay Human Chess and the costume contest, because those were definitely the highlights of the weekend for me. I had a great time at those. I'd say the venue's pretty good. Dealer's Room had a lot of really nice stuff. I don't know why people don't like the Tampa Convention Center. I think it's a nice venue. I mean, it's a pain in the butt to get around, to get into the venue. I don't know if that's a COVID thing or if that's just how they normally run things. I'd say the Tampa Riverwalk is the best place to take photos here. I do appreciate the accessibility of the convention center, the fact that it has not one but 2 hotels right across the street, plus a Starbucks, which is always a plus. Programming left a little bit to be desired, but I mean, there were a few standout gems, like the death match, which really needs to be a cosplay game show. I don't know why it isn't. I do find it interesting how their masquerade is different from other conventions' masquerade. At other conventions, the masquerade is a skit competition for people who enter the costume contest. At MetroCon, however, it's a formal event with a stage show worked into it, which sounds kind of cool, but might be a little confusing to people who are just looking to party. I honestly didn't know what to expect going to a con during the COVID era. I think MetroCon did a pretty good job given the circumstances, and I still got to have a good con experience. So I'd say MetroCon earns an A tier. I'd have to go to it at some point after the pandemic is over to see if it deserves an S tier, but I think given the circumstances, it's earned its spot. Alright, Tampa Bay Comic Convention. It was weird going to this one the weekend right after MetroCon, especially at the same venue. It had the same problem of weak programming, even worse so than MetroCon. There was even less to do and it was a much smaller crowd. I might just not be into comic or sci-fi conventions, but this one also felt like a giant vendor's hall with a couple extra goodies sprinkled throughout the convention center. But for what it's worth though, it did have a really nice vendor's hall. There was a lot of cool stuff that I'd never seen at other conventions. The costume contest was much better organized in regards to starting on time. The hosts were fantastic. Still managed to finish on time even though they had a ridiculous amount of entries, which is impressive. I would say Tampa Bay Comic Con gets a B. Probably kind of like teetering on like a B-, but still a comfortable B. And finally, we have Fort Myers Cosplay Con, which I just went to a couple weeks ago. I'd say CosplayCon is the same as Hallmat, where the venue was a strength and a weakness at the same time. Strength for its uniqueness, but weakness because it was so damn cramped. I think this one had better programming than some of the bigger conventions that I talked about, just because they had a lot more niche stuff like historical costuming, FX makeup. I'm glad to hear that this con's gonna be held during a winter month next year, because that'll kind of alleviate some of those spacing issues, because we'll actually be able to comfortably go outside and not feel like we're gonna melt in the sun. I think that should lead to some improvements right there. But for this year, I mean, considering it was a first year convention, I'd say it's definitely one of the better first year conventions that I've ever been to. It still has a way to go before it gets to A tier or anything like that. It's a solid B, and that's just fine. Just because it's a B con doesn't mean it's a bad con. A B is still very good, still worth going to at least once. I don't know if it's worth a 2-hour drive, but if you happen to live in Fort Myers, then always keep it on your calendar. But yeah, overall, I'd say this is a pretty solid list. I honestly wasn't expecting to give any cons S tier, but Holiday Monstery certainly earned it. I think Anime Next could get to S tier if they tweak their cosplay game show events. Dating Game is okay. In fact, I actually like how they added a fun twist to the 18+ version. But Cosplay Chess definitely needs some work. There was already room for improvement when I did it back in 2013, but it hasn't been held in main events in a while, and that's a little disappointing. I think if they added Deathmatch to their lineup, then that could be enough to boost it right then and there. Some of these changes might have to wait till after the pandemic is over, but it's still possible. We'll just have to wait and see. So those are my personal power rankings. If you've been to any of these conventions, feel free to share your thoughts on them in the comments below. I also have a link to the tier list in the description if you want to fill it out for yourself, or you can share with me your own tier list of the cons you've been to. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons, plus a notification bell. You can also follow me on my other social media linked in the description as well, and I'll see you next time. Later!